Hi everyone and welcome for another Apitherapy video. This time we'll be talking about Christmas, winter, and winter solstice, and that specific period of time that is sometimes some kind of a challenge for us. Of course, we all love Christmas, but at the same time, that winter period of time could be, the days are really short. And for some people, there's a bit of depression coming in because life is less flourishing. There's no leaves, there's no flowers, there's no huge action out there. And it is something that the bees know really well because the bees are going through winter. They do that and they know this really well. And they're actually teaching us something really important towards that specific period of time. And now, well, of course, that might not seem very obvious, and you might have not heard about this very often, but bees have some very specific ways of dealing with difficult periods of time. Actually, whenever there is very little pollen and nectar to harvest for them out there in nature, the queen bee will, slowly diminish laying eggs, and as there are less and less brood and less new life in the beehive, and so less brood, the brood are actually secreting the pheromone that is telling all the beehive to go and forage for pollen, because the brood needs a lot of pollen to live on and to grow, and they feed on pollen, so that's important. So as life is diminishing in the beehive when there's less pollen out there, so the queen bee is laying less, there's less brood, so they're asking for less pollen. So it's a whole cycle that slows the life of the beehive whenever there's a hard time. And that hard time could be the cold winter coming and there's less and less flowers. It could also be a drought. For example, if in some countries there's no winter, but there are serious droughts. And for bees, it's the same type of thing. There's a shortage of food happening. And whenever there is some kind of shortage of food, or whenever there's no brood in the beehive, could be a queenless beehive actually that would do this, they will do something very special. Actually, the worker bees that are hatching out as adult bees, but just hatching from their cell, just those new adult bees, worker bees, if there ain't any eggs, like brood, to take care of, they won't have that job, that those worker bees usually have when they're pretty young, which is to nurse all those young bees and to feed them. And so they won't develop those hypopharyngeal gland. It would still be there, but it won't become active, and they won't feed royal jelly. They won't have to do this. And whenever they don't have to do this, their whole system inside is changing. They will actually keep their energy, lots of energy that is supposed to be used to secrete that royal jelly and feed it to the eggs or the queen bee, and also that energy they should be using to go and forage on flowers and all this, they don't use it. They keep it in, and they're actually storing that energy in a very specific way, and we call those bees DIUTINUS bees. And or winter bees, or in some countries it could be also drought bees. Never heard of that here in Canada, but I'm sure that in some countries those bees, DIUTINUS bees, and DIUTINUS means long-lasting, and those bees are long-lasting bees because their whole interior system is changing. We call them winter bees or long-lasting bees, DIUTINUS bees, because they keep that energy in, and that will allow them to last for a really long period of time. Even if there's no flowers out there, even if there's no new brood to replace them, they will go through winter. There are bees living in Canada. There's bees in Yukon, Canada. That's north. That's really up north. And they go through winter pretty well. Why? They produce those DIUTINUS bees. And that will allow them to last for months and months. This is very special from the bees. And actually, that is some kind of a model for us too. Because if there's a hard period of time, let's say through COVID, for example, we've been through months and months where we weren't able to visit each other, to gather in family, for example. And that in some countries right now, this is happening, and Christmas is coming, and we're not really allowed to see everybody and so on in some places. And specifically for people that have chosen not to be vaccinated, not to get the vaccine. Well, for them, that is happening. And either if they do this for their own personal convictions or because, their health doesn't allow them to be vaccinated, well, they are asked not to go visit and not to gather. Well, all that joy that is happening and feeding ourselves, that joy that gives us that sensation that our life is, flourishing, is great. Well, we don't have that anymore. So we don't have that exteriorized part of joy in our life anymore. And the bees are showing us if that is happening, if we see that happening in our life, keep your energy within, keep it in, and turn on that light, that some kind of consciousness that is able to go through winter, that joy that stays there and allows us to go through winter. It's the same principle as a candle. You might have noticed I do have a candle today because it's Christmas coming, and very often in Christmas time we have those candle lights lit all around. Why? Because the days are really short and we need that light lit within ourselves, and the candle is a symbol of that. That beeswax, that candle body, let's say, the body of the candle made of beeswax, is some kind of fat, actually. That same type of energy, let's say. It's not the same thing, but it's similar. It's some type of fat that the bees keep within themselves. Well, the same thing happens with the candle. It's some kind of fat, that beeswax. And you just lit the top of it, and there's a presence, there's some light happening there, and even warmth, and there's life, let's say. And some scientists now are debating on, is fire alive? Their definition of life. That's another topic. But just saying, there's some kind of life happening on the very top of that candle, which is burning, and you have a lot of resources, and those beeswax candles, they last for a really long time, are long lasting. Why? Because the energy is stored in the beeswax, and it's slowly releasing that light and warmth and life from the top of the candle. And it's the same process that can happen within ourselves. Whenever there's a hard time coming up, whenever we feel, life won't be that happy because we won't be able to gather, or there's no more light. Some people with wintertime, they get depressive a little bit because the days are so short. And whenever we feel that happening, think about those DIUTINUS bees, those winter bees or drought bees or resistant bees or long-lasting bees. They keep it in, and they keep it just like a candle, a light lit, and life is still joyful. It's a silent life. Think about a beehive in the wintertime, not moving much, no activity at all outside of the beehive almost, except in sunny days where the bees will just go out for a little moment. Well, there's almost no activity, but within there's a secret life happening. And it's the same symbol, for the birth of Christ on winter solstice. It's happening at Christmas, right? Everybody heard that almost. Well, that is happening, and this is a sample of what is happening inside of us in wintertime when the days are short. It's a symbol of, there's a light that has to be lit inside ourselves. And that is the whole process of the DIUTINUS bees that keep that light lit, even if they're going through really hard times. Think about, Jesus was born, in a barn and in a manger, and, that was a hard time. And yet the light was lit. So even if the light is getting really thin, well, there's still some joy out there that we can keep in. And if we remain a regular worker bees that is not a DIUTINUS bees, and we want to forage, we want to keep staying productive and so on, and we want to have that same joy we have usually, we want to go party as we usually do, right? Well, that won't work. That will bring actually that type of depression when we cannot do it because we want to do it, but we're restrained. We cannot do it, but we want to. And that brings the depression in. If we understand the situation, we understand, oh, it's a hard time. I have to keep that energy in and keep that light lit within. Then we'll go through so much and we'll be even stronger after this. And it will be like a big process and we'll come out of it stronger than ever. And this is the way of the DIUTINUS bees. Really happy you heard this. Thank you very much for listening and see you another time for another Apitherapy video.